pretty dark, guys.
So I have like a problem in my life.
What's your problem?
Do you want to talk about this and then North Korea?
Sure.
Okay, I think that I may transgress basically every person I ever talk to.
How so?
Okay, so whenever someone is saying goodbye to me, usually they say something like, see you later. But I usually say, see you soon, and I feel like I may be one-upping them. Like, I feel like I may be saying, like, I like you a lot more than you like me, and you're the bad person because of it.
Well, at least you're not saying, like, I'll see you from the bushes.
Uh-oh. I just got an email from Amazon. We're contacting you about your order for Aurora World Baby Talk Carrier, Noah's Ark playset. Based on information we received from the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission, this product may have been inappropriately described as a pillow or sleeping aid for infants 12 months or younger. Although safe when used as a general toy, this product may pose a suffocation hazard for infants when used while sleeping.
Are you using it on your infant?
Ew.
It's a Noah's Ark playset. Who would have ever described this as a pillow?
I guess some manufacturer on Amazon.
I think this might be something my wife bought for my niece.
Oh shit, you better let your niece know.
Yeah.
Not to use it as a pillow.
No, but she's not an infant, and I don't think she sleeps. I think she just sits there with her eyes open, unmoving, but I don't know that you would call it sleeping.
Okay, so I think we had a North Korea episode a few episodes ago, and I'll try to give a fair gist of the episode. Juche was trying to think what grandmaster scheme Donald Trump had in his tweets at North Korea, because literally his foreign policy was tweeting at North Korea various threats. And so Juche wanted to know what the grand scheme master plan Trump had. And I think, AJ, you were very despondent because, life was short, nasty, and brutish. Is that a fair summary of the episode?
I believe AJ was just listing off cities in the background that would possibly be nuked. It was kind of like a nice bass beat to the episode, from what I remember.
Yeah, well, was it Kim Jong-Un or Il that released that map of cities that in the United States that he wanted to nuke? I forget now.
It was Kim Jong-Un.
Yeah.
And Austin was on that list. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sorry, I think we need to make an edit point. Everybody pause for a second. Okay. I have definitely been recording my MacBook's microphone instead of my USB microphone. And I just switched over, but we do need to clap again. I'm back.
Do you want us to repeat everything?
Do we need to do small? Yeah. Should we do some small talk again? I would be okay with that. I think that my recording, for some reason, even though it started, might have paused, and I don't know that I got everything. So we can do some small talk again.
Oh, okay. Who knows? Maybe I'll leave in all of the bad sounds also. Who knows?
That's okay. My cat's beating on the door in the background, and Tom can hear him. So sorry about that.
So how do you all know each other?
Oh,
it's a really good question. I am friends with Tom's better half.
Oh.
And
Momo. Lara is friends with Tom's cat Momo.
Yes.
That makes perfect sense.
Our cats are friends. That's how we met.
Oh, are you cat parents?
They follow each other on Twitter and stuff. It's good fun.
This is all not true, because anyone that knows Momo has no friends.
Momo has no friends. This is so true. But yeah, that's how I know Tom. And, he sent me the link to the podcast, and I think I might be a podcast super fan. You have 7 people who listen to you, who aren't related to you possibly, and I might be one of them. So
that's amazing. My wife downloads the show but doesn't listen to it.
Yeah, I listen to it when I go on runs, and you all have that good NPR calm voice. me at peace. You know, I don't like to be angry. I don't like it to get worked up. I like to be, you know, kind of in a peaceful place when I'm doing things. And you all, you know, for the most part, with the exception of your North Korea episode, you know, even though you're talking about, you know, some pretty high intensity stuff sometimes, it's you know, the delivery is pretty laid back. So it's good running podcast for me.
Oh, good. We should advertise ourselves to runners.
Mm-hmm.
I should just hang out outside like REI and be like, hey, you look like you might be someone who runs or hikes.
Yes.
How about this? We could go to a marathon, and instead of handing out water, we could hand out CDs of our podcast.
Please. For when I run with my Discman.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Okay, so North Korea again?
Sure,
Maybe?
North Korea.
Okay, so I think we're going to call this episode Everything Lara Knows About North Korea. So if in like the next 2 minutes you could tell me everything you know about North Korea, I would appreciate it.
Sure, and then we have like a 15-minute long episode. That sounds good. But no pressure, right?
I was just thinking afterwards we could just have AJ play some music in the background.
Okay, some calm, peaceful music. Maybe the soundtrack to like Doctor Strangelove. Maybe that would be fun.
Well, we don't have those rights.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So, do we need to recap the first episode on North Korea again?
Yeah. So
okay, there.
Kim Jong-Un wants to bomb Fayetteville. That's on his map.
Yeah, it should be.
Wait. Hold on. Fayetteville, North Carolina, or Fayetteville, Texas?
I would assume North Carolina, as there's a large military installment there.
Wait, I was thinking Fayetteville, Arkansas.
I was thinking Texas.
No, you all are probably wrong. It's probably Fayetteville, North Carolina. Fort Bragg is there. The 82nd Airborne is based out of there. There's a big military installment there.
I also made that up. I actually don't know. I don't remember what cities are on that map of cities he wants to nuke.
Fayetteville, Texas has my bank, which I know is a high priority target for Kim Jong-Un. Mm-hmm. So, you gotta weigh that.
Could be. I suppose it's in the realm of possibility.
So my understanding is that in a previous episode, we had spent a lot of time talking about North Korea. In two respects. The first was a list of cities that Kim Jong-un wants to nuke, like, for example, Juneau, Alaska. And then the second thing we talked about was whether there was any sort of artifice or strategy to Trump's actions towards North Korea. My feeling was that there's no artifice or strategy to any of the things that Trump does, let alone with respect to North Korea. And my understanding also is that Lara was very frustrated with me.
I was not very frustrated with you. I was frustrated with the whole episode because it felt like there was a whole bunch of pearl clutching and just that there was a whole lot of lamenting, but not a whole lot of thought or strategy on what the U.S. could be doing, whether, Trump isn't president or somebody else is president. What are we doing to kind of combat this problem, this North Korea problem? It was just kind of a whole bunch of fretting is what it came across to me. That's all.
I was very fretful.
That's pretty accurate. There was a lot of fretting.
There was some fretting. There was a little bit of fretting. So I just wanted to bring in a little bit of perspective, a little bit of philosophy, a little bit of political history, and then kind of go through just some stuff that I've read of different strategies we may or may not use in order to deal with North Korea. That's all. Does that sound like a plan?
Great.
All right. Where do you want to start? Let me see. I want to see if I can bring up my notes and keep the recording going.
I guess I might start with a question.
Sure.
What is North Korea? Like, do we even really know what it is?
Yeah, I think we do know what it is. I mean, it's a country, an independent country, it thinks it's still at war with us, and has been since 1950. It is a totalitarian dictatorship, right? That is run by the Kim family. The dictatorship differs from other socialist totalitarian regimes in that they follow this thing called I'm going to mispronounce it because I don't speak fluent Korean or any Korean, but the Juche philosophy, which is that they are the masters of the revolution, and the people are the motivating force for revolution and for construction and reconstruction. It's a very man-centered worldview that man decides and is the master of everything. And they're
man as in male or man as in human?
Both. Man as in human. They refer to their country as the fatherland, not the motherland. So I do think that there is a male paternal take to that as well. And then
this sounds like secular humanism to me.
With the caveat that there is one man in particular, Kim Jong-Il, who was the creator of this philosophy and therefore the ultimate master. So, they really look at the Kim family as really the ultimate leaders, right? So they are all powerful. They are, gods walking this earth. You hear it in like the stories that come out of North Korea. Kim Jong-un got 3 holes in ones all at the same time, or some Kim Il-sung, was able to shoot 10 birds out of the sky with 1 bullet. These crazy things that don't really happen, but the people of North Korea believe because, well, if they don't, they might get sent to a work camp. But there are some political scientists who believe that the North Korean people really do believe that the Kim family does have these somewhat superhuman powers. So they do have this aura of superhumanness to them, right? So we have this very powerful, very dynamic leader in a country that is very long-term in orientation and in planning, which is very different than what we see here in the West, right? We are a very short-term on-demand society, right?
So, sorry, if I can just
sure,
interrupt.
Go ahead. Yeah,
are you saying that our country, the United States of America, is not governed by an all-powerful and dynamic family?
No, and no, I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think that whether you're talking about the Trumps or the Obamas or the Bushes or the Kennedys, I don't think that our presidents are held in the same type of regard as the way that the Kim family is regarded in North Korea.
Tom, do you think Malia Obama is as dynamic or powerful as Kim Jong-un?
Probably not, but Michelle maybe.
Michelle maybe.
Okay.
She's a very strong woman for sure. Very, very, very strong. But yeah, so I think that, understanding how their leadership is perceived and understanding that, in order to maintain this complete and total, some would call it brainwashing of their people, they have to demonstrate how all powerful they are. There's a lot of, these military displays, the marches, they build these, big buildings that nobody lives in, just to display that they can do these things, right? And it's all part of kind of a long-term strategy. We in the West tend to be kind of short-term in strategy for a number of reasons. If you look at our political cycles, our politicians have to make decisions and impacts on a 2-year or 4-year election cycle, right? And if they don't do, presumably, what makes the people happy, they will be booted from office, right? So they're very short term in their thinking if, job preservation is one of their goals. We at a presidential level, we look at it in 4-year and 8-year terms, right? Like, the most recent economic downturn that we've had, it lasted what, a couple of years, 3, 4, 5 years. And that was a terrible, devastating thing to us. People lost their homes, right?
Some might say it lasted the entire Obama administration, but then drastically turned around on January 20th of this year.
However long you want to define it. I mean, it was not generations of an economic downturn. It was a finite amount of time. I would argue that it started, Bush era, and started turning around at some point in the Obama administration. But yeah, 5 or so years, right? And of course it's devastating. Some people lost their homes. A lot of people lost their jobs. And in a short-term worldview, those things are terrible. But for a country that has a little bit more of a long-term worldview, they don't have elections to deal with, right? They don't have a political cycle to deal with. They don't really have, public approval ratings to deal with. So you can look at things a much longer timeline. And, when did they test their first nuclear missile? I think it was back in 2006 or so when they performed their first nuclear test. So that's 11 years ago. They've had nuclear capabilities for 11 years. They've had other, military capabilities for a long time. They've been able to destroy Seoul for a very long time, but haven't. And it's because, in my opinion, a couple of things. One, what would the ramifications of some sort of strike to a local target? What would those ramifications be? And two, is it really part of the long-term strategy that he laid out when he created this country back in the 1950s? What he had plans, and I think that his folks that followed after him are kind of following in his footsteps and laying out his plan, I guess.
I think Kim Il-sung was before Kim Jong.
Okay, Kim Il-sung. So anyway, that's kind of the first thing that I think we need to think about with North Korea, is that there's a long-term plan here. And sure, I think their long-term plan is the ultimate annihilation and destruction of the United States. But, the best laid plans, sometimes don't ever come to fruition. So I think there are a whole lot of steps in between where we are now and a either first nuclear strike on the U.S. And I think that the likelihood of a first strike on the United States is pretty low.
So
sure.
If I can jump in, so I think this might be a good point to add some background to our previous episode. So shortly before we aired that last episode on North Korea, the Washington Post had published this article basically saying, North Korea could cross the IBM threshold within the next year or so. And it was based on leaks from the Pentagon's Defense Intelligence Agency.
Right.
And what they were saying was that this shaves basically 2 full years off of what the consensus forecast was in terms of North Korea developing their ICBM program. Mm-hmm. And so for further background, that's important because, North Korea while it has nukes, it has to have a way to deliver those nukes to the United States and make them blow up in the United States or a particular point in the United States in order to be a true threat to the United States. Right now, they have capabilities of destroying Seoul, South Korea. They have capabilities of destroying Japan, and those those individuals are our allies, and obviously we protect those individuals using our both our missile defense system, but more importantly, the gigantic horde of nuclear weapons that we have, is such that if North Korea currently were to launch a strike against those countries, we could completely devastate them without any sort of ramification to us, because they don't have a program that is capable. They don't have a long-range ICBM program that is capable of taking one of their nukes and launching it into space and then bringing it down somewhere over the continental United States. So with that backdrop was when the Washington Post dropped this article saying, well, they're about a year away from it as opposed to 2 full years, which was the previous forecast. And then with that background, Donald Trump came in and started tweeting about North Korea, making threats and exchanging threats back and forth between North Korea and, himself. We were despondent, but Lara, I think you believe there's no reason to be despondent. Everything's going to be okay. Is that true?
No more despondent than usual.
I mean, we're usually pretty despondent.
You are.
At least I am.
You're very despondent.
One of my top 10 favorite activities is to lay on the floor and wait to die.
Well, I think that you all basically just did that the whole last North Korea episode. And if you would have focused on kind of your first part of that background, that North Korea has, advanced faster than we would have thought on their ICBM development, and that they can and have had the capabilities of destroying local allies, but have chosen not to do so for the past 11 years since they've had nuclear capabilities.
Well, I mean, but isn't the reason they haven't destroyed it is because of the United States threat, right?
Well, why is that threat going away if they get ICBMs?
Well, the difference would be is that they can strike back at the United States, right? That the United States mainland would be under direct nuclear threat from an unstable regime, right? Up until that happens, up until they develop ICBM capabilities, the United States can strike long range without any threat to their mainland.
Yeah, but so here's where I don't really buy into the hype with this ICBM stuff. We have a missile defense system. It would take North Korea, I think, 30 minutes from launching a nuke to hitting the western coast of the United States. That's a whole lot of time for us to mobilize, and to take the nuke out, midair, which again, that wouldn't be the greatest thing, but then we take out their nuke and then we take out all of North Korea. And with our vast stockpile of nuclear weapons, I think that North Korea, do you remember mutually assured destruction of the Cold War era?
Yeah.
So that was kind of the, both the USSR and the United States have enough nukes to completely render the other, annihilate the other, if one decided to strike first, right? And I think in this case we have assured destruction in the case of Korea. If they strike, whether it is a local target or a shoot a nuke at us, I think that it is an assured case of destruction for them. We would absolutely wipe them out. I'm sorry if you can hear my cat in the background. He's starting to beat on my door again.
Yeah, but I guess my question then, would be one, let's say, North Korea launches a nuke or whatnot. What are the chances that we could destroy them before they strike, South Korea, Japan, Guam, Hawaii, or the U.S. mainland, right? Like, I feel like there's a good chance that the closer you are to North Korea, the more likely you're going to incur significant damage before the United States has a chance to respond. And the other thing too is, okay, let's talk about our response, right? We have two ways of responding, right? One is we can launch a nuclear weapon at them and completely demolish them. The other way is we have a U.S. missile defense system. And before today, my last real research into the U.S. missile defense system was in high school in the 90s. And at that time, our missile defense system was practically a joke. People were still making fun of Ronald Reagan's Star Wars program. The missile defense system was not good at all. I did some research today, and it seems like the reliability of our missile defense system is about 50 to 60%. So like one of every two nukes that go in the air we can knock down. Right. And with maybe a small country like North Korea, that's not something to worry about because, what are the chances they're going to have a large number of nukes, at least in the near term future, such that it would be difficult for our nuclear defense system to knock down all of those nukes?
I think a couple points. I think that there are other options between just nuclear weapons and a missile defense system. I think that there are non-nuclear options. We could strategically target military installations. We could work with China to assassinate Kim Jong-Un. We could. There are a whole host of options out there between using a nuclear weapon and relying on our missile defense system. And go ahead.
But is that before or after they launch a nuclear strike? Right? Like I think those things seemed like they can be on the table, but that seems like before that those would have to be taken before they launch a nuclear strike against one of the areas that in our little sphere of influence.
And I still ask the question: what's in it for North Korea to launch a nuclear strike at this point? Whether it's somewhere locally close by to them, where we would have a much lower likelihood of intercepting their nuclear weapon before it hits Seoul. I don't think that we would, if North Korea wanted to launch a nuke at Seoul today, Seoul would be hit with a nuclear weapon, right? I think that, I don't think that there's any question about that. Just the proximity of that city to North Korea, I think that there's no way our military or South Korea's military could prevent that from happening. Same with Japan. I think that they're too close, and they would be hit before anybody could intervene.
What does North Korea think about South Korea? This is actually a question that I'm not very familiar with, but I know in a lot of sort of ethnically homogenous and ethnically nationalistic totalitarian regimes, right? They feel a sort of like paternalism towards ethnic groups that are similar but in other countries, right? So like Germans feeling like a sense of paternalism towards Germanic people outside of Germany, right? Just as an example. So like what is North Korea's feelings towards South Korea? Like, is there a reason why North Korea wouldn't want to nuke South Korea?
My understanding is that they feel like South Korea is a puppet government of the imperialist United States.
It's true.
And they would love to liberate South Korea from the imperialist United States control. So I think that they think of themselves as like I said, the paternalistic, the machine of change, the machine of the revolution. They will, through the guidance of the Kim family, drive the revolution to reunite the Korean Peninsula under Juche philosophy, Juche rule, and Kim rule. Is my take on it. Tom?
AJ sent this cool link over the Slack, and I got distracted.
But I guess you could imagine why the fact that if North Korea wanted to nuke someone, it would be easier to nuke Seoul than the U.S. You can see why that doesn't offer much solace, right? Like because it doesn't sound like they would have as much motivation to nuke Seoul as they would have to nuke the U.S. You know what I mean? Like even though it's harder to nuke the U.S. than Seoul, it doesn't sound like that's something that they want to do.
I don't see what is to be gained for North Korea by nuking Seoul or Japan right now. I think that in their minds, nuking the United States is, the ultimate what they want to do, right? They want to take down the big imperialist, power. But that being said, going back to the long-term strategy that I think that they are employing, I don't think that they're going to, develop ICBM technology with the ability to put nukes on those ICBMs and then immediately go into using them. I would think that there would be a whole lot of testing and a whole lot of puffery and display of power before launching those weapons at us. I think that there would be plenty of warning and a dramatic, distinct change in tone in their communication, right?
But I think that raises some issues in and of itself, right? So one of the reasons why we can effectively impose sanctions and do speak as brashly as we do towards North Korea currently is we sit far enough away where they cannot strike us with nuclear warheads. Let's say that changes, right? Let's say they develop those ICBM capabilities, and let's say they develop a capability of putting nuclear warheads on those ICBMs and being able to target us and all that other jazz, right? Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, North Korea is now talking the big talk. Now they've got a big stick to go along with that talk. It makes us less likely to or not less likely, maybe that's not the right word, but it certainly puts us in a more difficult position in terms of threatening North Korea or pushing North Korea too far, right? Which I think would signal to our allies in the region that maybe the United States doesn't have the United States is less likely to wipe North Korea off the face of the earth if the United States knows that North Korea can at least get one or two hits in on the U.S. mainland before they get wiped off the face of the earth, right? We in that scenario we would have something more to lose than we presently do, right? If that were true, and if that is our the way that our allies would be looking at it, which I don't think is an unreasonable way to look at it, then they would think, okay, if this is true, then maybe I need to develop my own nuclear weapons to protect myself against North Korea because I know that the United States is not as likely to pull the trigger given what they stand to lose. We stand to lose a lot more than the United States. So South Korea, for example, stands to lose a lot more than the United States should something happen that triggers this all-out, warfare conditions, right? Same thing with Japan. It might encourage these countries to abandon the decades and decades that the United States has worked to put in place nuclear non-proliferation treaties, right? And if those two countries start proliferating or working with a nuclear weapons program, that might encourage other countries around the rest of the world to also develop nuclear weapons or can create a nuclear weapons program, right? The proliferation of nuclear weapons, I think, is just as big of a deal as any other scenario that we can play out.
Sure, and I think this kind of goes back to something we talked about a few minutes ago about the non-nuclear options that we have on the table, and I think that if we want to not just mitigate but prevent nuclear proliferation, then I think that it's time for the United States, and truly it's been time for the United States for a long time and I think it has been happening for a long time, working with our regional partners to come up with a strategy to manage the Kim regime. and to really, and now maybe, the development of the ICBM technology and capabilities will light a fire under us to really start taking the North Korea problem seriously. I don't think we take the North Korea problem seriously for many reasons. I mean, they're kind of out of sight on the other side of the world, but so are a lot of our problems. But there's really not a lot they have to offer us in terms of resources, right? They're not a resource-rich country. We're not going to go in and, invade them and get their oil or their, minerals or anything, because they don't really have any of that, right? So they haven't been a really high value problem for us to look at. And now with technology to potentially, launch a nuke in our direction, now we have some incentive to really start taking action. And I hope, and now we're back to the lamenting and the pearl clutching, because it relies on the Trump administration to do this.
Yeah.
Right?
The Clinton administration has had to deal with this North Korea problem. The Bush administration has had to deal with them, and Obama, and all three have. I don't want to say failed, because this isn't. We're still here, I guess.
Right.
But they haven't disarmed North Korea. They haven't really.
No. And they're not going to disarm North Korea.
Yeah.
I don't think that that's on the table. I don't think it's realistic.
They haven't made any sort of progress towards a peaceful solution, I guess. I don't even know what the end game is then, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I would argue, that's a good question. What is the end game? What do we want to see? And I think the easy, peaceful solution is have them get rid of their nuclear weapons and their nuclear program. I think that's really unlikely, just given the climate, knowing that that's their trump card, right? That's really the only thing that is keeping the Kim dynasty in power, is this the ability to dangle the, we can nuke you, carrot. It's not a carrot, but it's they can dangle that in front of us, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that they will willingly give up their nuclear weapons. You can try to do things to, and let me back up. Let me say, and that the previous administrations from 1950 onward have not dealt with North Korea and have allowed the Kim regime to stay in power. And maybe it was a mix of timing. There's not a sense of urgency about it. For a really long time, they were just this irrelevant little state with a weird little leader who thinks that he can, get holes in ones on every single hole when he plays golf, right? So I think for the vast majority of their history, they've been fairly irrelevant. And then in 2006, they get some nuclear weapons. They have nuclear capabilities. Previous administrations weren't able to disarm them, but they can't hit us. Now they can hit us. Now there's a sense of urgency, and now there's a reason to start paying more attention to them. With previous administrations, there's been the diplomacy that you see and read and hear about. There's also some, backdoor diplomacy that happens. Do I think that diplomacy is really going to be the way to get the Kim regime to give up their nuclear weapons? I don't think that's going to happen. I think that working with the partners in the region to, really crank up the pressure on them, the secondary sanctions. I think the Trump administration announced secondary sanctions for companies in China and maybe India, maybe Russia, for companies that are trading with North Korea, and really kind of cranking down on the secondary sanctions there. That's step one. Am I happy that Trump is the one in office? Not particularly, but I think that that's where you have to kind of rely on the, not just the leadership within the executive branch, but really the lifelong civil servants who've been working with the North Korea problem for, 10, 20, 30 years, the career folks who advise and gather information and intelligence and really kind of, you know, help steer leaders in the right direction with the information that they can gather and provide, right? So I do think that, you know, now is the time to start looking at those other non-nuclear options, really turning up the gears with secondary sanctions, talking to China. The problem with China is China has some serious interests in North Korea too. You know, they are a big trading partner, North Korea. North Korea imports most of their stuff from China, and China also uses North Korea manufacturing. It's really, who knew slave labor was really cheap for manufacturing, but China gets a lot of their manufactured goods out of North Korea. So there is an economic incentive to keep, you know, the crazy leader happy, right? If they make him mad, you know, maybe they'll point, you know, Beijing's not too far away either, right? They don't want a nuke pointed at them. So, you know, I do think that China's in kind of a unique position to either partner with us, but again, in the long term, I think China is another country that thinks of things in very long-term strategy as well. You know, they're thinking, you know, when they're the world power, you know, they know that the United States time is going to come to an end at some point. And I think we all kind of know that. And we all kind of know that China is going to be rising to the forefront in economic and foreign policy matters. So I think that they're probably looking at that too and looking to see where they want North Korea to play into their long-term strategy.
So what are the chances that Donald John Trump, president of this here United States, is able to effectively execute any one of these strategies?
I think that you have to also rely on his the support system and structure that he has in place. I do think that the guy who, you know, the Twitter maniac who says ridiculous stuff on Twitter, I do think that I don't think Twitter is not his foreign policy. He has a foreign policy infrastructure in place, and I think that this is a big enough problem that there are people who have been doing this for enough time that they can be loud and forceful and say, hey, Donald John Trump, you really need to pay attention to this, and this isn't something just to.
Well, I mean, okay, let's look at his foreign policy team, right? At the head is Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, who says he hates the job and plans. I mean, by all indications, and if you believe, you know, fake news, he's going to leave the job by the end of the year, right? Then you have UN Secretary Nikki Haley, who, I mean, you know, I'm not putting any eggs in the Nikki Haley basket. Let's just say that. Who do we have then? The Secretary of Defense, Mattis? Is that who we're relying on?
We have ambassadors. We have ambassadors to China, Japan, and South Korea. We have people. We have people.
So if we really have some sort of like robust group of professionals, why do you think it is that Trump appears so shambolic?
Can I also add to that, like, I mean, we had people in the Obama administration, in the Bush administration, and in the Clinton administration.
Yeah.
You know, and some might even say we had more robust and capable people in those administrations than the current one.
Maybe at higher levels of leadership, yes, but I still think that you have the day-to-day civil servants who, you know, those positions aren't as transient and don't change as much with the political tides. I think that I'm not a Trump defender. I'm not a Trump fan. I'm not going to say that I trust him or like his style by any stretch of the imagination. But I do think that there's, as with any presidency, there's a whole lot going on behind the scenes that we don't know about, we're not going to know about, we're not going to be privy to. And in order to stay sane and not curl up on the floor and hope to die, I have to believe that there are folks behind the scenes in leadership positions, whether it is the Trump administration, the Obama administration, the Bush administration, or the Clinton administration, who are working tirelessly to preserve our republic. And I know that there are people out there, like I have to know that there are people out there doing that, right? It's just something, whether you take it on faith or not, I think that it's something that has to be happening behind the scenes. So I trust in the good of the civil servants of this country, the good people of this country, right? I believe in us.
So what if history really is just one thing after the other?
What do you mean?
Well, like, what if the stupidest explanation really does explain most of the things that have ever happened? I mean, basically, I think we all sort of feel like there's this essential decency to humanity, and if not humanity, at the very least, sort of the section of humanity that comprises what we think of as the liberal West, and that, fundamentally decent people work their way into positions where they can exercise some small amount of control over the levers of power, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, what if history really is just the stupidest sequence of events in a row? Or put differently, what if the sort of world that we experience, right, say from the end of World War II onwards, what if that world that we've experienced is aberrational, right? I mean, there's been a real moderation in politics and inequality, et cetera, from the 1940s onwards, and that has been eroding over time, starting with the late 70s, the early 80s. The inequality has been rising. A lot of segments of society that we thought we were done with, like, for example, Nazism, are resurgent. I mean, what if sort of there's a 60-year period where stupidity didn't best explain everything that's ever happened, but what if it's true that for all of the rest of history, the stupidest explanation really is the best one, right? Like, what if we shouldn't depend on some sort of quiet underclass of civil servants to keep the country together? I mean, what else could you possibly be doing?
I mean, where do you want me to take this? I could take this in a couple of different directions. If you want, I mean, what do we think that the stupidest thing could happen right now? It'd be what? To preemptively launch a nuclear weapon at North Korea?
Yeah, I guess so. I guess that's a great way of
Is that what you think the
question.
stupidest thing is?
I don't know if I think that's the stupidest thing, but I think if we're really going to go down the road of assuming that there is some sort of artifice or strategy to what may or may not happen next, it seems like it would make sense to sort of work backwards from what we think the stupidest thing may be. To me, it seems like the stupidest thing is probably a preemptive nuclear strike on North Korea.
I mean, that sounds pretty stupid to me. I mean, but in the end, we would probably catch them off guard. And if we do it before they have ICBM technology, there would be a whole lot of loss of human life. North Korea could probably mobilize enough to launch some or all of their nuclear weapons at our allies, which would probably piss our allies off. Can I say that? So yeah, that would probably.
Our allies are probably not listening to this podcast, so yes, you can say that.
Probably not. But that sounds like a pretty stupid thing to do. I think it might, maybe we would be done with the Kim regime. Maybe we would get them to use up all of their existing nuclear technology. Maybe we could eliminate their capabilities of producing more nuclear technology, but you're left with presumably a power vacuum unless, some North Korean guy who might want to step into the job who's, fairly moderate and will work with the United States. I don't know who that guy is.
I feel like a lot of people work backwards from a couple core assumptions. And one of those is, have you ever heard of like Francis Fukuyama? He has this theory that that Western liberal capitalism is the end of history. And by that, he means it's sort of it's this self-stable equilibrium of historical progression that, the world naturally tends towards Western liberal democracy. He wrote a book about it. He wrote a book called The End of History shortly after the fall of the Soviet Union. But basically, I think a lot of people work backwards from this sort of belief in the persistence of durability of liberal capitalism. And so from there, they assume that all of these mechanisms that would work towards preserving it surely must exist, right? So, if liberal capitalism is self-perpetuating, then there must be all of these institutions that will continue that infrastructure forward into the future, right? And what if a much steadier equilibrium of humanity is like feudalism or dictatorship or totalitarianism or something, right? I mean, to me, it just seems like often we work backwards from a couple core assumptions, and maybe we often don't spend enough time thinking about what if the world actually is pretty bad.
AJ, how does that theory explain China, for example, or current modern day Russia? By that I mean, how does the theory that the world trends towards Western liberal democracies?
So 10 years ago, you probably would have still agreed with Fukuyama, right? You probably would have said that it looks like Russia seems inexorably to be continuing to liberalize. But actually what we've seen since then, as Putin has continued to consolidate his power, is that Russia is maybe, the most illiberal it's been in the last 20 years, right? That the liberal capitalism hasn't been self-perpetuating in Russia. It actually has been fairly fragile and undurable.
But would we have said that about China?
I don't know. I think that a lot of the things that are true about China are sort of inscrutable. But you know what I mean, right? Like, I think that we haven't been able to do the sort of nation building we had hoped to in certain corners of the world, right? I mean, we haven't been able to install liberal democracies in sections of the Middle East, for example, or even in Libya, where we had ultimately supported regime change, we haven't been able to support a steady government there. And so, I have a lot of concern that both on the left and the right, there has been this real belief in the inevitability of like liberal democracy and liberal capitalism in the Fukuyama sense, and that hasn't been borne out in any of our adventurism abroad.
I think this kind of is an interesting transition to a discussion on a unified Korean peninsula and what that would look like. Where I'm going with this, so you asked the first question, what's the stupidest thing that we could imagine here? And I think we're in agreement that a preemptive nuclear strike is pretty stupid, and that would be the thing that we would least like to see. Are we in agreement there? Yes?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, okay. Going back to, just to touch on AJ's point about the durability of liberal capitalism and whatnot, I would think that, America has been, and I imagine will continue to act in such a way to continue to promote our system, our way of doing things, and continue to, expect that we as a nation are going to endure, right? Like, we're not going to take actions that would harm our worldview or our way of life, presumably, right? Like, if we decide to make a preemptive nuclear strike on North Korea, we would be doing that with the assumption that we would be preserving liberal democracy in the United States, right? Not that we would be destroying it. That might not be the ultimate outcome, but that's what the intentions would be, correct? Yes?
I mean, I don't know about that, right? I mean, do you think that Trump spends a lot of time really thinking or caring about the preservation of liberal capitalism?
Capitalism, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of events in the last couple of years can mostly be explained by thoughtlessness, right? That I don't know that you can imagine there's any intentionality behind a lot of the things that have happened.
Specifically what?
I mean, just for example, electing Donald Trump, right?
I mean, yeah, if you agree that a lot of people voted for him by casting a vote against Hillary, yeah, I suppose so.
But I don't
whether or not it was, I mean, it was still an intentional act to go out and vote for the guy.
I don't mean just the people who voted for him, right? But I think that a lot of our institutions failed in that election, and on both the left and the right. I mean, I think that I think the FBI is an institution that failed, and I think that the RNC was an institution that failed, right? I mean, I think institutions have a couple purposes. I think the first purpose of any institution is to preserve itself. And the second is sort of whatever it is that whatever purpose it is that the institution was created for, you would hope that they are taking steps to further those goals, right? And so you would imagine that, but that the RNC, the RNC didn't succeed in either of those goals, right? Like it has not succeeded in furthering a lot of the institutional missions that you would think the RNC has, like causing the sort of policy changes that the RSC espoused, say in 2015. It hasn't been able to protect itself from insurgents in primary after primary, not just with Donald Trump, but with like Todd Akin and what's her name in Nevada, the one who was really bizarre, Sharon Engel. You know what I mean? I think that the RNC has not protected itself from insurgents, has not been effective at advancing the sort of changes in policy that is an institutional goal. The one thing you can say that the RNC has been successful at is been in causing its candidates to be elected. But I don't even know how much credit you would give to the RNC for that fact. I think that there are a lot of institutions in our country that have failed, and I think the best reason to explain why has not been that there's some sort of, I don't know that you would say that there's like this trend or this like international movement of for a while people were really concerned about the rise of some sort of international alt-right movement between like Le Pen in France and Gert, I forget his last name, in the Netherlands, and the hard right governments in like Poland and Hungary. There were real concerns about the rise of some sort of like international alt-right movement. But I think that it's like nothing that's like half so coordinated as that, right? I think it's just been a lot of thoughtless people who have not really kept a big picture in mind in going about their life, right? Like I think Reince Priebus's biggest problem as the head of the RNC was just that he didn't think about, I don't think that he thought particularly hard about the institutional mission of the RNC, or he had a different view of what that institutional mission may have been, right? I mean, I think that a lot can be explained just by the thoughtlessness of individuals when by happenstance they were in positions to move the levers of power.
I think that kind of supports one of the first points that I brought up was that Korea, China, and some other East Asian countries tend to think in things of a much more long-term strategy, whereas us in the West, we're a lot more short-term, and a lot of decisions that have been made have been short-term, with short-term goals or short-term strategy in mind, not a big picture look at either what we want the Republican Party to look like in 50 years or that kind of thing. I think that I think people make decisions, especially in the West, with a short-term mindset. What do I get out of it now? Not what will I get out of this in 10 years, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. But I think it's hard to marry that view with a sort of faith in our institutions to work from now on, right? Well, that somehow the civil service will prevent having a war in the East or something.
Two points to that. One is I think that now it is a short-term problem, right? It's not a long-term problem. And two, you can say that institutions have failed, but these institutions have not disintegrated and gone away. They may have had failures, or they may not have succeeded or taken action in a way that we thought would happen, but these institutions still exist. And they are still capable of making the right decisions and, going forward.
Tom, what do you think?
I don't know, man.
I think he's still looking at your link, man. He's laughing at cat memes.
Well, so
yeah, they are.
So what do we think? Mm-hmm. I mean, what is it that we should think? What are good opinions to have in this situation?
I mean, I think that one is that there definitely needs to be an executive administration that is taking action to prevent, if not prevent, slow down the gaining of ICBM technology that would allow North Korea to deliver nuclear warheads across the world.
But what does that mean? Like, what are those actions?
I guess step one, impeach Trump.
I mean, we've been fairly successful at hacking their nuclear technology for a long time. So, we have been behind the scenes working to impede the development and slow the development of their nuclear programs. Now, we're at a point now where we really need to step up our game. And yeah, I agree with you, Tom, that we need to make sure that, there is a high level executive caring about this problem. And do I think that that's happening? I don't know. I don't not know. But in order to keep myself from, curling up in a ball and waiting to die, I have to believe that there are people out there who are taking actions to protect our republic.
I do agree with that China is going to be a big player, right? Like the two big trade partners that North Korea has right now is China and Russia, right? I'm sort of I think we can just say, we're not going to get Russia to cooperate. Like I don't think Russia there's really any set of interests that would incentivize Russia to cooperate with us on this front. But the good news is China is a bigger trading partner than Russia is. And so if we could somehow get China to cut off that trade or squeeze North Korea on that front, then I think we could see positive movements forward.
I agree with that, but I think we also have to be careful with how we use China, because China has a vested interest in who is leading, the country right next door to them, right? Mm-hmm. So, and their interests might be different than our interests.
Yeah, sure.
So, I do think that we need, I do think, ultimately, I think that this is probably, I won't say more of a problem for China to solve, but at least as much of a problem for China to solve as it is for us. And that we are going to have to be aware that China is going to want somebody in power next door to them that has their interests in mind. And the person that they have in mind, and the leadership and the regime they have in mind for North Korea, might not look like the regime we have in mind. Whether it's a unified Korean peninsula or a maintaining a north and a south, there might be some disagreements with China there. Or maybe we can come to some sort of, at least it's not Kim, right? At least it's not the crazy guy. We can deal with, a socialist regime as long as it's not, somebody pointing nukes at us. But again, that might be short-term thinking. So.
Sidebars?
Sure. Who goes first?
I think you do.
I do? All right. Now, keep in mind, I've listened to like 4 of your podcasts, so I don't know what sidebars have been done in the past, so I pulled a couple. Have you all talked about the drone-killing eagles?
No, but that sounds like a good sidebar.
Does that sound like a good sidebar? Cool. There are some wild bald eagles, and I'm hoping to like reinfuse some patriotism into this program, and be proud of our national bird once again, instead of just thinking that it's like an overrated buzzard. Ooh, sorry, that's my dog at the door. Please edit that out.
So you got a lot to learn. AJ doesn't edit anything out.
Edits nothing. That's good. So these eagles, these bald eagles, there are, I don't know if you've been to Alaska, but it's beautiful. and many parts of it. And a lot of people will go up there and fly some drones and take some pictures. And I guess there's this tourist who, got a little bit too close to a nesting mama bald eagle. And she flew out of her nest and attacked the drone with her talons and like threw it down onto the ground and just totally like busted and disintegrated this wildlife photographer's drone, which made him really sad. But he was like, oh, well, I'm more worried about the health of the eagles. I got to researching it, and apparently there are some countries in Europe, I think France and Belgium, who are training eagles. This was a wild eagle out in Alaska, but there's some countries in Europe who are training eagles to attack drones and using it as part of their military defenses. And it just reminded me of, back in like World War II and whatnot, and us using pigeons to deliver messages behind enemy lines and using birds in warfare again. So I thought that was kind of cool. And maybe we can start training our national bird to, kill drones and stuff, in the military. So maybe they'll earn their keep now instead of just being these overprotected buzzards that we can't, wanted to earn his place in our national, our national reverie or what have you. So that's it. During killing eagles.
Do you know what our national animal is?
That's not an eagle. Is it a beaver?
No, the eagle is our national bird.
Yeah.
What's our
national animal?
Yeah, what's our national animal?
I said, is it a beaver?
Is it a buffalo?
It's the American bison. So.
Oh, I was so close.
Yeah.
That makes more sense than a beaver.
Well, I guess technically it's the national mammal.
Mm-hmm.
Because I guess eagles are animals, so eagles are the national bird.
Should I go?
Yeah, sure, if you want.
So my sidebar is a nonfiction piece by George Orwell called Homage to Catalonia. The book is about Orwell's experience traveling to Spain to fight with the pro-Republican faction against Franco in the Spanish Civil War in the 1930s. And it's sort of the story of how Orwell gets there is pretty interesting. So he was a member of the International Labour Party. And so he shows up in Catalonia and eventually in Barcelona. And there's a political party in Spain that's sort of associated with the ILP, and it's called the POUM. In my head, when I'm reading it, I just call it the POUM. And so he almost totally by happenstance joins up with the POUM. And Catalonia at the time is ruled by a sort of left to right spectrum of socialist parties. And the anarchists and the POUM sort of represent the left socialists, and the communists represent the right socialists. And so the first section of the novel is about Orwell's experience fighting on the front lines against fascists. And then later he talks about his experience in the internecine fighting in Barcelona when the right socialists, backed by the communists and the International led by Stalin, et cetera, consolidate power in Catalonia. And then finally, the last bit of the novel is when the POUM is outlawed and he has to escape from Spain and go into hiding because anyone who's ever been a member of the POUM is being rounded up and imprisoned. So there are like two scenes from the novel that I think are really interesting. I just want to read them really quickly. So the first is, and I said a novel, but it actually is nonfiction. I mean, as far as I can tell, there isn't really any embellishment or fictionalization. I think this is really stuff that happened to Orwell. So when he first arrives in Barcelona, he writes, "It was the first time I had ever been in a town where the working class was in the saddle. Practically every building of any size had been seized by the workers and was draped with red flags or with a red and black flag of the anarchists. Every wall was scrawled with the hammer and sickle and with the initials of the revolutionary parties. Almost every church had been gutted and its images burnt. Churches here and there were being systematically demolished by gangs of workmen. Every shop and cafe had an inscription saying that it had been collectivized. Even the bootblacks had been collectivized, and their boxes painted red and black. Waiters and shopwalkers looked you in the face and treated you as an equal. Servile and even ceremonial forms of speech had temporarily disappeared. Nobody said senor or don or even instead. Everybody called everyone else comrade and thou and said salute instead of buenos dias. Tipping had been forbidden by law since the time of Primo de Rivera. Almost my first experience was receiving a lecture from a hotel manager for trying to tip a lift boy. There were no private motor cars. They'd all been commandeered. Further down, he says, it was the aspects of the crowd that was the queerest thing of all. In outward appearance, it was a town in which the wealthy classes had practically ceased to exist. I think that's actually sort of interesting. I think it is pretty amazing that, there was like this radical transformation of life in Catalonia in response to like the fascist uprising. For a short period of time, there was sort of he describes his experience in the militia where nobody had ranks, everybody got the exact same pay. You didn't have to like salute officers. There were people who were who led groups of other people, but they all they didn't have official ranks, they didn't have changes in pay. You didn't have to you didn't have to obey orders unquestioningly. There was this very different culture of equality. And there's a point when Orwell is on the front lines, and he says, in every suitable position, men, usually machine gunners, were told off for shouting duty and provided with megaphones. Generally, they shouted a set piece full of revolutionary sentiments which explained to the fascist soldiers they were merely the hirelings of international capitalism, that they were fighting against their own class, et cetera, and urged them to come over to our side. This was repeated over and over by relays of men. Sometimes it continued almost the whole night. There was very little doubt that it had its effect. Everybody agreed that the trickle of fascist deserters was partly caused by it. The man who did the shouting at the PSUC, that's a communist party. The man who did the shouting at the PSUC post down on our right was an artist at the job. Sometimes, instead of shouting revolutionary slogans, he simply told the fascists how much better we were fed than they were. His account of the government rations were apt to be a little imaginative. Buttered toast, you could hear his voice echoing across the lonely valley. We're just sitting down to buttered toast over here. Lovely slices of buttered toast. I do not doubt that, like the rest of us, he had not seen buttered for weeks or months past. But in the icy night, the news of buttered toast was probably set many a fascist's mouth watering.
Nice.
So anyway, this book is amazing. Even if you, I just think it as a firsthand account of Civil War and fighting on the front lines of a Civil War, it is a pretty amazing work, and I totally recommend it.
Cool.
My sidebar is budgetbytes.com. This is a lady who publishes recipes, and what I like about her is they're budget conscious recipes. The idea is that she'll break down each of the ingredients and she'll say, okay, this is how much this meal is going to cost you for the entire recipe, or this is how per serving it's going to cost you. And they're actually really good recipes too. I really like them. Like, for example, you could make Mediterranean farro salad with spiced chickpeas, or sweet potato and kale salad. They're delicious. I encourage you to make one of them. They'll be in the show notes. Check the show notes.
Sounds good. Now I'm hungry. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, that
Cool.
was my goal. All right. Well, that was North Korea, I guess.
Ugh. Yucko. That's what I say.
I think you need to take a vacation there. Check it out. See if you like it.
I think that's illegal.
No, it's not. Well, maybe the Trump administration made it illegal.
Only Dennis Rodman is allowed to go to North Korea.
Yeah, what is Dennis Rodman's deal? I think we did it. I think we did a whole show.
Cool.
Good job, everybody.
Cool. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah, of course. Our pleasure.